start tonight by sharing with you a story. And this is a true story. It's a story of a woman who's in my book, which is Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born. This is the story of a woman named Christina. Christina is now about 60 years old. A number of years ago, when Christina was in her early 20s, she was employed as an administrative assistant at a college in Southern California. And one of her daily duties in that job was to go to the mailboxes, which were in the basement of the building, and retrieve her employer's mail. So on one particular day, just as she had done dozens and dozens of times before, Christina descended those stairs to the basement mailboxes. But on this particular day, unbeknownst to Christina, someone had planted a pipe bomb in the mailbox. So when she inserted her hand to retrieve her employer's mail, the pipe bomb detonated. And the force of this explosion was so great that it actually picked her up off the ground and threw her 10 feet backwards against a concrete wall. There were 6-foot splinters of wood that were shot like arrows out of a bow into the wall around her. 2 fingers were severed, both eardrums were ruptured, and flames from the explosion scorched her body from head to toe. When she got to the hospital, doctors actually had to hold magnets over her eyeballs to extract the shrapnel from the pipe. She planned this experience before she was born. In a little while, we're going to find out why she actually wanted to have this experience. But before we do that, what I would like to do tonight is start by telling you a little bit about myself and how I came to write a book about such an unusual subject. Then I will give you the results of the research. That is, the 4 main reasons we found why souls plan big challenges for themselves before they're born. Then we'll look in detail at one of the stories in the book so that you can see how this works in action. Then I'll tell you briefly about a couple other people in the book, and we'll come back to Christina's story and find out why she planned that explosion. And then I'll make some concluding remarks, and then there will be plenty of time for question and answer at the end. So a little bit about me and my background and how I came to write a book on this subject. For me, the path to writing Your Soul's Plan started in Chicago in mid-2003. And at that time, I was self-employed as a marketing and communications consultant. I actually have a background that I think is atypical for the author of a New Age book. I have an MBA. I was in the corporate sector for a number of years, basically doing different types of corporate writing, and feeling very, very unfulfilled by this work. You know, I used to say to people, I had the feeling that if I fell off the face of the earth, none of my clients would know I was gone. They would just plug somebody else right into my position and carry right along. But alongside that feeling, I also had the sense that there was a higher calling or a higher purpose to my life. I just didn't know what it was, and I wasn't sure how to figure out what it was. Now, you have to understand, I come from a very conventional background. I grew up in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. I have a very conventional family. I have a conventional education based on the scientific method. So when I was having what you might call this existential crisis, naturally my first attempts to resolve it were conventional in nature. So the first thing I did, I went to all my friends and family and I said, you know, I'm really unhappy doing this corporate work, but I think that there's a higher calling for my life. I don't know what it is. What do you think I should be doing with my life? And invariably they would say one of 2 things. They would either shrug their shoulders and say, I don't know, or they would suggest that I do whatever they were doing for a living. And as you can imagine, neither of these responses was tremendously helpful to me. So when that didn't shed any light on the matter, my next conventional attempt to resolve the existential crisis was I went to a career counselor. And I took this thing that some of you will know about called the Myers-Briggs Inventory. And I discovered that I'm an INFJ, and that did me absolutely no good at all. So when that didn't work, the next thing I thought was, well, these conventional methods of figuring out my higher calling are not getting me anywhere. I need to think outside the box here. What can I do? And so this idea came to me, go see a psychic medium. Now again, coming from the conventional background as I did, going to a medium was completely out of keeping with character for me. Knowing what I know now, I have to think that a spirit guide was whispering that idea in my ear, but at the time I didn't even know what a spirit guide was. I just knew that this idea had come to me, go see a medium. I thought, what the heck, you know, it'll take an hour, I'll spend a little bit of money, and if nothing comes out of it, then there's really no harm done. So on May 7th of 2003, I had this session with the medium, the first one I've ever had. And I remember the date because it was on this day that my life changed. The medium introduced me to the concept of spirit guides. And she explained a guide is a non-physical being, a highly evolved non-physical being with whom we plan our lives before we're born and who then guides us through our lives after we get here. And through this particular medium, I was actually able to talk with my guides. Now, they said a lot of amazing things to me that day, one of which was they said, "You planned your greatest challenges before you were born." And I'll tell you, I shook my head and I said, why in the world did I do that? And they said, you did this for purposes of spiritual growth. Now again, coming as I did from a conventional background, I would probably have dismissed all of this as some kind of delusion on my part, except that earlier in the session with the medium, the guides had said things to me to indicate that they knew literally everything about me. And I want to give you an example that made a big impression. 5 years before this session with the medium, I had been going through a very difficult time in my personal life. And one day I was home alone in the privacy of my own home, and I said a prayer to God. And I didn't even say it out loud. I just thought it silently in my mind. And the prayer was, "Dear God, I can't get through this alone. Please send help." Now, this was 5 years before the session with the medium. I didn't even remember having said that prayer. But my guides knew about it, and they reminded me of it, and they said, "Your prayer was answered," by which they meant that additional non-physical guidance had been sent. So as you can imagine, when you're talking to beings who know everything about you, including a prayer you said 5 years ago, alone in your home, and silently in your own mind, it gives them a fair amount of credibility. So when they brought up this idea of pre-birth planning, I was listening pretty closely.